Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and today I'm sharing with you my Gina Ahrens design team project for May. The theme this month is sparkly dimensional texture. Any of those things, or all of them, which I did. I wanted to show you the construction of a quick little mini journal that I got the idea for it from Vicky from Messy Table Studio, who's on the design team as well. And I've decided after I've been trying to finish some of my journals, finish all the pages and say, okay, this book is done. And I realized that making journals and finishing journals are two different things. I've been reluctant to make too many just because I think that I can't finish them because I jump from one journal to another to another. I don't finish all the pages. So I've made a lot of journals for specific things. Like in November, we do the art journal every day project. And I make a separate journal for that, and I finish the entire thing during the month. But like journals that I've purchased or other ones that I've had for a while have just been sitting around not being finished. So I don't make a lot of them simply because I don't think I'm going to finish them. I don't need another journal. But I love journals that have pages that are already started, whether it's painty papers or it's a junk journal or it's, in this case, gel printed pages. I like to have a place to start in the journal. So somebody asked me how to construct one of these, and I figured I would just make a video and then I would finish the cover using the theme of sparkly, dimensional, and texture. So what I did is I cut 12 pages out of a very large piece of mixed media paper. So that's the reason I was showing at the beginning that I used a mat and a cutting ruler and what do you call that thing? A rolling cutting tool. Those came in a set from Arteza, and when you have something larger than your cutter, that's really the only way you can cut them. These pages are 11 by 5.5, so that when I fold them in half, they make a 5.5 by 5 inch, 5.5 by 5.5 inch square book. And like I said, there's 12 pages. So then I gel printed them, and that how I do that with pan pastels is in a different video, and I'll link that when the process of the pages starts. I'll link in the iCard that video of how to gel print with a gel plate with pan pastels. And these, by the way, the whole entire project, I used Gina Ahrens Designs stencils. I have 6 of them. There's certainly a lot more than that, but I have 6, and I use the 6 that I have to make all these designs, both in the pages and on the outside of the book. So then I folded all the pages together and I glued them to each other back to back. So basically you just have a stack of glued together pages that become a signature. You make it as large as you want. This one has 12 pages. You could make it 30 pages. And maybe I'll construct a book like this for this November's Art Journaling Every Day challenge. I'm not sure yet. Then I cut 2 covers out of a cardboard envelope. I get these cardboard envelopes a lot because I'm in the Stencil Girl Club, and that's how they mail their stencils. And also every time you order, they mail their stencils in these cardboard envelopes, and they're great for constructing things like this. You could also use the inside of like if you buy a dress shirt, there's the cardboard inside of that. Cereal boxes have a pretty decent cardboard to construct things with, but whatever. I cut it 5.5 by 5 3/4 because I wanted it to be slightly larger. But on one side, I'm going to line the cover up against the spine, so I only needed it to be 5.5 on one side. Believe me, it makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense. And then I covered these by cutting some lighter weight paper that I had gel printed with pan pastels in the same stencils, slightly larger, and then gluing it down onto the paper, and then folding in and gluing all the sides to the back so that it's completely covered. And that's what I'm doing right now in the video is picking out some designs, cutting them down, folding in the edges to make sure it's real tight, and then gluing and folding everything down. And that there's a couple different ways to do this. The first one that you saw was done with cutting like a notch out of the corners, cutting basically those corner edges out. This time I just cut an angle and I'm gluing down all the angles. So there's two ways of doing it basically. And I did it two different ways. The thing about this way is that you sometimes get a little bit of a gap. It does cover the edges better, but you get a little bit of a gap sometimes if you don't fold it well. So as you can see, there's like a little notch. And if you're the thing that you're covering covering it on the inside with isn't large enough, you might see some of those little gaps. And that's the reason I was thinking about putting another page on the inside, but then I decided, no, I'm just going to glue them to them anyway, so what doesn't matter. So there's my signature all glued together. Now, what I could have done at this point is I could have put my duct tape, in this case Gorilla Tape, on the signature and folded it over the edge to strengthen it. That's what I should have done before I glued on the covers. But I like the look of a like an old-fashioned book where they used to have the cloth binding on them, and it had like this separate piece that covered the end of the book. I don't know if I'm describing that well, but you'll see what I'm going to do. So I didn't need to put the duct tape on now before I glued on the pages. I just was going to do it after, so I didn't worry about it. But if you want the cover to be exactly the cover and not anything else on it, you could put the duct tape on before this step. So you'd be putting it on the signature over the binding. The duct tape is just to make it more strong. That end is so floppy and the pages kind of want to come apart. And so the duct tape helps to keep that spine together and to really make the book flexible. So you can see it's all constructed now. The Gorilla Tape, I'm pressing it down on the end of the pages, and that's where all the folds come together, by the way. That's the side that has all the folds together. And I don't know that I'm explaining this really well, but you can look at what I'm doing and figure it out a lot easier than I can really explain it. It's basically a bunch of folded over pages glued back to back, duct tape on the end, and then glued covers over. The covers glue to the back of the first page and the back of the last page. So here's where I'm talking about, I was telling you I like to have an old-fashioned book binding when I make journals. I do this on a lot of them because if I make a journal that has sewn in signatures, I like to cover those the threads on at the binding. I like to cover them. I don't want to see them. So I do this a lot. And since the challenge this month was sparkly dimensional texture, I decided that I would use some metallic textured handmade paper. And I'm using a decal edge. I cut the piece so that it could fold over and cover the binding. So that way the Gorilla Tape is covered. Doesn't matter what color it is or anything. It's just there for support and structure of the book. And it's covered up, so I'm not worried about it. If I was worried about it being a component of the book, I would probably use white duct tape or cloth tape or something like that. There's lots of that type of strong tape with strong adhesive out there in the world that you could use for this, just to improve the binding and structure of the book. Once this book is complete, it's so sturdy and heavy, and because the pages on the inside are folded over and there's no split in the center, you don't have to worry about your mediums running down into the center of the book, which is one thing I don't like about sewn together books. I made a lot of different types of books. So now comes the shimmery, sparkly, dimensional texture, blingy cover. And I've got a couple pieces of chipboard cutouts that are heart-shaped. For the smaller one, I'm covering it with that gold shimmery textured paper. So I cut a piece that is slightly larger than the heart, and then I took the scissors and made little notches all the way around so that it would fold fairly smoothly, and then I'm folding it in and gluing it to the back, and this covers the entire heart all the way around the edges and makes a pretty little gold heart. Takes a minute, and I'm using tacky glue. By the way, the glue that I use, and I know I didn't say this, the glue that I used at the beginning when I was gluing all the folded pages back to back is Yes paste, and it is fairly, it doesn't crack when bent. It's kind of rubbery, but it takes it a while to dry. So this whole process of this book took me the whole day because I had to I had to fold all the pages, glue them together, then put pressure on them to dry. I had to let the texture paste dry. I had to like let so many things dry that it just took me the whole freaking day. That's the thing I don't like about things like texture paste and stuff like that. But this whole thing was about texture. I wanted to make lots of texture. Didn't mean to drop my lid onto that. This is the Crafter's Workshop metallic texture paste, and I put it through the stencil. This is one of Gina's stencils, and it's kind of a coppery. It's called antique gold, but it's kind of a bronze. And I have this other piece that I want to glue on there. That's a die cut piece of cardstock, and so I needed to scrape away a little section to put that on. And to attach that, I'm going to use heavy gesso, which gives another texture. So I had to get out the heavy gesso, and then you could also use texture paste or molding paste or modeling paste. There's different names for it, but I just used the heavy gesso in this case to make some more texture on here. I just applied it with a palette knife, and then I just squished that piece of die cut card stuck right on there. Makes a really cool texture. The knife makes texture. The bumpy holes on the piece of cardstock make texture. Of course, I'm trying to blend it in to this other texture that I've created. And then I used just the top section of another one of the stencils to make some more little dots all the way around the edges in different places. I had to trim some of the plastic off the stencil so that I could get to it. It's the one that's like little seeds or something. I don't know, but it's got some little dots. I just wanted a few more little dots here and there. And this is still the heavyweight gesso, which makes nice texture. So then I have to sit this aside and let it dry for several hours before I move on. So once I get all the texture on there, then I just leave it on the desk and go away for a few hours. That type of stuff drives me crazy. I'm so impatient. I'm also using a little wet, slightly damp paintbrush to just kind of smooth down some of the areas of the gesso where I got some that I didn't want. But you will see it all comes together in the end. It looks weird right now, I know for sure. But I also used a stencil, different stencil. This one to me reminds me of kind of like feathers or something, peacock feathers. I used this one to add texture to the larger heart with the heavy gesso. I'm going to link all the different stencils that I used for this entire project in the description box below, linking them to Gina's Etsy shop so that you can find the different stencils that I used. So now all this stuff is dry. So I'm starting the decoration process. So I have a couple different colors of acrylic paint. One of them is a Dina Wakley, I think it's called Peacock maybe. or something. And then the other one is from the Hobby Lobby, their brand or whatever it's called. And I can't remember right now what it's called. It's not Artist Loft because that's Michael's. Anyway, two different colors of kind of a tealy blue or uh, a robin's egg blue and a turquoise type colors. And I put that on the heart, and then I'm kind of wiping some of it off and blending it a little bit with a baby wipe. And I did the same thing on the front of the book, covering up a little bit of the area that has the textured white gesso on it, brushing it on, and then um, wiping it off a little bit. Then I have some different liquid or fluid acrylics. This one is quinacridone gold from Decoart Media fluid paint. And I want to get kind of like a drippy, distressed look. So I make sure that there's a lot of things inside the book that are going to protect the rest of the pages because I'm using a lot of water in a spray bottle. And I took the paint, I slightly watered it, and then I'm letting it drip. And then this one is the teal from Golden Fluid Acrylics, which is a very fluid paint. I don't need to add water to that. It's already fluid. And it has a lot of pigment in it. It's from Golden, so it's a very high quality paint. So I let some of that drip down. And um, by adding the water and the dripping, it allows the texture to show itself. The drippy paint goes around the areas that are raised and makes kind of almost like a little halo effect on them, which makes them stand out more. That's the reason I was doing it this way. And then I get all that dry and I finished the binding. I left the binding open, that gold piece, until I was completely finished coloring the background of the cover because I didn't want to get a bunch of drippy paint on that piece of gold handmade paper. So I wanted to make sure that you understood why I left that open like that. So now I'm going to attach my dimensional hearts. Before I do that, I want to pump up the dimension, the look of dimension on this heart. So I'm again using the quinacridone wet paint, quinacridone gold, and then also the fluid gold paint from Golden. That's the high flow. And then I also use a little bit of Decoart Metallics copper paint, and I water that down as well and put some of that on. So I've got lots of different shimmery, sparkly, metallic stuff on the front of this, which is meeting the challenge of it being sparkly, it being dimensional, and it having texture. So when this is dry, I'm going to attach it, and I'm going to use Sook Wang very sticky tape to put the big heart, and then I'm going to use dimensional foam dots to add the small heart. Just so I'm getting a lot of dimension. I've got texture in the background. I've got hearts standing out and standing out even more on the front, and I've got a lot of shimmer and sparkle on there. That tape's very sticky. It's not going to come off. So, like I said, this is for the Gina B. Ahrens design team for May. If you've enjoyed it, please remember to give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment or question below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this on Pinterest if you like it and want to save it for yourself for later. With the little foam tape squares, I don't want the white edges to show, so I used a gold Posca pin and went around the edges of the tape so that when you lift up the book and look on the inside, it doesn't have white pieces. They're the same color. And then I needed these to stand out a little bit more from the background, so I'm using some dioxazine purple. It's a dark purple color. and it's a fluid paint, so I'm applying it with a water tank brush so that I can like feather it out and just add some shadows around the outsides of the hearts. And then I also added some splatter by just flicking that. I added some splatter by flicking my Posca pen, and then I used a fan brush to add some copper spatter because I still had the copper metallic paint on my palette. And then my final thing to do was to add some sparkly gems, stick-on gems, rhinestones, whatever you call them, onto my front. And then I was complete with this book. I hope you've enjoyed it. That's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.